Hello, and welcome to Central Booking, where writers and readers are the authority. I'm your host, John Valeri. Today on Central Booking, I'm talking planning and plotting with debut mystery novelist Mary Karnes. Mary is the author of Wedding, Bride, and Doom, the first in a new series from Level Best Books featuring wedding planner Kate Ludlow. A recent divorcee, Kate returns to her Connecticut hometown to start anew, her teenage daughter in tow. But when she has the misfortune of stumbling upon the very dead body of her florist and old high school nemesis, Kate finds herself a person of interest in a murder investigation. And the detective in charge of the case just so happens to be her first love. Awkward. Will Kate somehow pull off the wedding of the season despite this cloud of suspicion, or is she destined to live unhappily ever after? It's a case of write what you know. Before you get the wrong idea, let me clarify. Mary owns and operates a wedding planning business. See, perfectly innocent. A college English major and former teacher, she survived 6 corporate moves and now makes her home in Connecticut, where she plans weddings, plots books, and enjoys being a wife, mother, and grandmother. Not surprisingly, personal and professional experiences imbue Wedding, Bride, and Doom with its unique flavor. USA Today best-selling author and award-winning investigative journalist Hank Phillippe Ryan praised witty and entertaining and a terrific mystery, a page-turner of a story, and a wonderful debut. Now, Mary Karnes unveils the stories behind the story of Wedding, Bride, and Doom. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Central Booking. I am delighted to be in conversation with Connecticut's own Mary Karnes today. She is the author of the brand new Wedding, Bride, and Doom, which is available for your reading pleasure right now. Welcome to the show, Mary.
Thank you so much, John. It's just a pleasure to be here.
I am thrilled to have you. Like I said, Connecticut is so rich in talent, so it's always such a pleasure and a privilege for me to maybe be able to introduce some new writers to a local reading audience. And I think the title of your book kind of says it all: Wedding, Bride, and Doom. Dun dun dun. So we're going to get to talk all about that today. But before we get to the mysteries of this book, and I say mysteries because there are more than one, I was wondering if you wouldn't mind giving us the setup, because you have Katie Ludlow, who is a wedding planner, and she's just moving back to the fictional village. I can't speak this morning, not enough coffee, I dare say. But she's just coming back to the village of fictional Eastbury, Connecticut. So before we get into the mysteries, can you sort of give us the personal circumstances of her return home?
You bet. Well, Katie grew up in the little fictional town of Eastbury in Connecticut and made her way back to California, where she lived with her husband and teenage daughter, and her marriage broke up. So she had a little part-time wedding planning business, decided to move back home and pursue her business full-time. So that's where we find her placement.
Sure. And so, of course, she finds murder. She has the misfortune of stumbling upon a very dead body. It is her high school nemesis and sort of begrudging colleague in the wedding business, Lori Sue. And so I'm wondering if you can tell us, what are the implications of that discovery, and how does this impel her independent investigation into the crime?
Well, she, as you said, had bad blood with Lori Sue from high school. And during the very beginnings of the investigation, people would remind her, oh, there was that thing in high school, but you really don't know as the reader what that thing in high school was. And she finds the body, and they had unpleasant words the day before the murder via text. So she is already considered a person of interest.
Yeah, it doesn't take long.
And it escalates. Right.
And to expand on that, small towns and communities being what they are, the case is assigned to, Katie's former high school sweetheart, Brian McAllister, who is now a detective. He is given that case to investigate. So I'm wondering if you can tell us sort of how this forced reunion is both a comfort and a complication when it comes to the investigation itself for Katie.
Well, there's a comfort level there because she knows that the investigating detective knows her personally and knows that she really is a good person. And there's already doubt established in his eyes that she could have actually been a murderer. But they didn't part on good terms. So there's an undercurrent of animosity and ill will, although an attraction. So it's a very complicated relationship from the get go.
It absolutely is. And it, of course, would be her misfortune to not only stumble upon a dead body, but then be forced into a reconciliation with sort of the one person she's gone out of her way to avoid in her homecoming. But it makes for a great, complicated crime story. And we love those. So I also mentioned that there were sort of several mysteries in this book, but I would say that the second primary mystery is a ring, an heirloom ring that Katie is sort of tasked to find for one of her brides. And I'm wondering if using the ring specifically, and also the idea of this murder case that involves both a friend and a colleague, if you can talk about the ways in which these circumstances legitimize Katie's sleuthing, because it can be very hard to do that for an amateur sleuth, and yet she has personal and professional ties to the case, which sort of smooths that over a bit.
Well, to backtrack just a wee bit, there's an antique ring in my family history that is passed down from my great grandmother to the first female born of that new generation. And I had the honor of giving that to my daughter a few years ago. So that was sort of on my mind on how I could incorporate something from my own personal history into the book. And the bride, the new bride that she's working with, tasks Katie with finding this ring, and she's befuddled. She said, why, a ring's been lost for 50 years. Why would you think I could find it? And the bride says, well, you're Katie Ludlow, the very well-respected wedding planner. You can do anything, which is sort of what brides today think about wedding planners, that, no matter what, you could fix anything, find anything. And I actually am a professional wedding planner. So I sort of get that sense that that's what's expected of us.
Yes, wedding
Sometimes
planners,
it's hard.
miracle workers.
Yes.
But yeah, I mean, that level of involvement does sort of necessitate, some interesting circumstances for her, which is great because she has personal and professional sort of ties to the crimes and, the things that she's looking into. So people are reading this, and I think it's easy to buy into, why she's naturally curious or even at times a bit nosy, because she has a lot riding on that. And as the wedding
A
planner,
lot
you
at
want
stake.
to deliver regardless. I mean, as much as you want to say no to a crazy request, are you going to do that? Not Katie Ludlow. She has
That's
her
right.
reputation, apparently. So I wanted to ask you too about Katie's role as mother, because she is a devoted mom, oftentimes nosy, as we probably need to be, especially if our kids are teenagers. So her moody daughter, Ellis, is athletically gifted and has a really great spirit and presence throughout the book. So I'm wondering if you can tell us, as a parent yourself, how does that lens of motherhood allow you to access the sense of loyalty and fierce protection, to Ellis, despite the fact that your children are now a bit older than Ellis is here in this book?
Well, that section and that piece of the book was very easy for me to write. I actually have four daughters, and they are now 35, 32, 26, and 23. So my 23-year-old isn't too far removed from the 16, 17-year-old Ellis. So it was easy for me to draw upon that experience and that mama love in writing my book. So that was very fun and easy.
Sure. And I think it's another way, for us readers to really buy into what Katie's doing, because not only, is she trying to salvage, I should say, her reputation, her career, but she has a daughter to protect too. And if anything happens to her, what's going to happen to Ellis? But yes, there's
Exactly.
definitely that mama love, which makes it fun to read. And, moody teenagers, I mean, you'll get a couple giggles out of Ellis because she's a great character and she surprises you at times, which I enjoyed. But I want to ask you too about setting, because something fun that you do is you sort of meld real and imagined places throughout the book. For instance, Eastbury, is a fictional village, but I think it will seem very familiar, to people who know
Yes.
Connecticut in certain parts of Connecticut. But then you have actual locales, such as the Wadsworth Mansion in Middletown that people
Mhm.
will recognize and may even have been there. So can you tell us, why you chose this approach of having both real and imagined settings? And then, how people familiar with Connecticut might recognize some of Eastbury despite it being imaginary.
Well, Eastbury, as you say, is imaginary, but it's mainly based on Glastonbury, where I live. And I, as you mentioned, have lived all over the country. I started out in California with my husband, and through corporate moves, we moved from California to Utah, Utah to Texas, Texas to the Chicago area, Kansas City, back to Texas, and then ultimately up to Connecticut, where we've been for 20 years. And of all those places, New England is my favorite. So it was a joy to be able to write about something that I love. And there's so much rich history. It was easy. Most of the places are real, and some are created. But it was just easy, and it made it, I think, believable to write about those places because they are real, most of them.
Sure. And it's fun for somebody like me to say, all right, this is Eastbury, but that does seem a little bit like Glastonbury. And the police
Mm-hmm.
station sounds a bit familiar, in that
Right.
coffee shop. But actually, as you mentioned, you have moved around a lot. And, for Katie, coming home, I think, can be both healing and healing and hard at once, because, we're not necessarily coming back as the same people we were when we left, nor are we meeting people, as they were when we left. So I'm wondering if you
Yes.
can tell us, as someone who has moved around as much as you have, how did those experiences help to inform Katie's sort of conflicted sense of self through returning to her roots?
Wow. Well, I think you summed it up so well. As you leave an area sometimes as an adolescent, and then you go to another location and live, and you grow up. And when you go back to that location, if you haven't seen or spent time with people in a long time, they've changed, you've changed, but there's still that base core soul that you love and appreciate. So it's a challenge to
Sure.
forgive sometimes. Katie is tasked with forgiving someone close to her about a hurt that she didn't even know until the end of the book has occurred. But she does it with grace and love. And I think she appreciates and understands that these two people have both matured throughout their life, and she's able to move on.
Right. And I think it's particularly, maybe hard to come home to where you were an adolescent because you have such deep feelings. I think teenagers feel things in a way that we don't necessarily
Yes.
as children or adults, and then to have to confront the good and the bad of the people that you knew way back when. And to fall under the sort of cloud of person of interest in a murder case, very, very difficult. But another fun aspect of this book that I really enjoyed at the end, there are very specific wedding tips, and there are also some recipes. So if you want to make some meatballs, you can go ahead and do it. But every chapter, starts with some considerations for wedding planning that are very contemporary. And as I was reading the book, I was realizing, wow, things have even changed, since I've been married, which seems like just yesterday. And then I say, wow, it's been 14 years. I don't know how that happened. But I'm wondering
Right.
if you can talk about, how these elements enhance the reading experience for us readers, but also allow you to draw on your own expertise as a wedding planner, because that's something very unique that you bring to this book, that background.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I got into wedding planning because my second of four daughters announced her engagement 10 years ago. And my husband actually wanted to get a planner. And I was shocked because I'm typically approached by the bride or the mother of the bride in my business. And I said, no, I'm not spending good money for that. We have four kids. This is going to be too expensive. Um, I won't go into details, but it was a rocky road. So the next year we had a wedding planner. I loved doing it. And I think I hope that the little blurbs at the beginning of each chapter comes across that I really love it. And I hope it pulls the reader in to the whole world of weddings. And there's really no right or wrong anymore when it comes to weddings. I tell my brides, as long as you're happy and you don't hurt people's feelings, anything goes. So I love that aspect of it. I'm glad you enjoyed it too, John.
Yeah, it was a fascinating way to be drawn into the chapters, and it just kept making me think I would never assume that being a wedding planner is easy, but my gosh, the intricacy of things that somebody needs to consider ultimately, you or Katie
Yes.
is kind of astounding. But yeah, I loved that aspect of the book, and I think that readers will too. So I did want to ask you
Right.
about the publisher too, because this book comes out through Level Best Books,
Mhm.
under the oversight of the great Sean Riley Simmons. And I realized again, I don't know Sean in person. I don't think that we've ever met, but we're connected online. And I've really loved getting to know her personality through Christopher Zagorski's We Are What We Read. It's just sort of a YouTube show that she co-hosts with him. And it's amazing because, you get to see a person in sort of real time and you say, okay, this is their personality and this is how they speak. And she just seems, like such a presence and a dynamo in the field. So I'm wondering if you can talk about, why this was the right fit for you and what the collaborative process was like with Sean to bring this book out into the world.
Well, Sean is my hero. I can't say enough wonderful things about her. I'm a first time traditionally published author, and she took a chance. I hope that she saw my potential, and I'm succeeding for her. She just guided me through the process. She was always available to lean on and be a resource, and it was a very simple process. She had work for me to do, but I embraced it, and I can't say enough wonderful things. I love her.
Well, thank goodness, or that would have been a bum question.
Yeah, that's right.
But it's nice to know that, Sean in reality is every bit as exceptional as she seems to me to be.
Probably
Uh,
more so.
I'm like, right? Like, it's just awesome. I love it. So I wanted to ask you too. I mean, obviously, you have this career as a wedding planner. You have also been a teacher, but writing has been of interest to you for a long, long time. So can you tell us what chose you to pursue this in earnest at this point in your life? And also, do you have any words of, guidance for others who may have the same dream and think that their time has passed? Because that's not necessarily the case. And I think that you in this book are the proof.
Very true. Well, let me start off by saying I'm 63 and I'm getting my first book published. So never give up. And I was going through some of my mom's old papers and such, and I found in a lockbox a envelope that was canceled, through the post office, dated 1966. I was 6 years old, and it was my first rejection from Red Book magazine, which I don't even know if it still exists. I had sent in some poetry that I wished to be published, and they sent me a sweet little note back. I had a school newspaper, not a school newspaper. I had a little newspaper that I published about my neighborhood when I was 10. And with the old mimeograph, remember you're probably
Right.
too young, but the purple ink that the teachers would make. I was a writing major in college. I always wanted to be an author, but I had these 4 kids that I had to raise, and moving all through the country, it was a challenge. But once they got off to school or got married and were done with school, I decided I'm going to pursue this. And my biggest advice to potential writers is be tenacious. My agent, Don Daddle, who I adore, rejected me 2 times. And on the 3rd time, I just sent another query letter and said, look, I want to be represented by you. You're a winner. You are a terrific advocate and representative for people in the cozy mystery world. I want you. And I think she just finally said, you know what? I give. This woman isn't going to give up. So it took me a while to get my book, and she helped me to where it should be, to be queried out to publishers. And it took a couple years to do that. And she just send it back and say, I'm not going to even read it. I can tell by the first chapter it's not ready to go. So I'd work on it again. And I think it took only 2 months to get a publishing deal once it was ready. So,
wow, that's excellent. I think you've given us all hope, and that is great advice. Be tenacious, don't give up. If you have to go back a third time, you can do it. But I
that's
love
right,
it.
or fourth.
Right. And I love, stories like yours where you realize that writing doesn't have to be your first job, your only job, done at a certain point in time. I mean, it's one of those things that you can come at with passion and wisdom at any point in your life. And so listening to your story makes me think, well, John, if you ever get it together, there might just be hope for you.
Absolutely, John.
But let me ask you too. So I know that you have also been a teacher. Can I assume that it was of English and writing and that sort of thing?
You would actually assume incorrectly.
This
I
is why
was,
I should not assume.
yeah, I was a kindergarten, first grade, and second grade teacher. And then I had children and I stopped working because my husband traveled so much. It just wasn't an easy fit to be a working mother as well. But I started substituting teaching about 15 years ago. And I told my husband, I love 6th through 12th grade. If I had been teaching English in those grades, I would have never stopped. They're such interesting little people and I love it. So I think I missed my calling in the teaching
Right.
world.
But that's okay because you're making your mark in the writing world. So
That's
there's that. But let
right.
me ask you that, usually when I speak to teachers of English and writing, I ask, what can be taught versus sort of intrinsic or based on discipline and tenacity, as you mentioned. But, having worked with both very young children and then, adolescents, can you just tell me a bit about what you found to be the power of storytelling? Because I know that storytelling is something that really tends to resonate with a young audience, and I'm sure that that sort of translates in ways to your fiction as well.
Well, I think with storytelling, it creates a new world for children to imagine and create and hope, and it stretches their mind. And I think it gives them the possibility that they may be, whatever it is the story is about, whatever the hero is or the heroine is, and it gives them hope and just a concept that they can do more. So I think that's a really valuable tool.
Sure. And so whenever somebody comes on the show, I always ask, and you've broached this topic already, but what is the best advice that you were ever given? And then the best advice that you were never given and had to learn for yourself throughout the process of actually doing the work of writing. But so you've told us, don't give up, be tenacious. Obviously, I think that that's key, especially today in publishing. It's very, very difficult, but there are opportunities if you are willing to seek them out. So beyond being tenacious and not giving up, has there been any particularly powerful advice that you've received? And then also, having completed and published your first novel traditionally, what is something that you discovered that you wish maybe somebody could have told you sooner?
Well, I think the best advice that people gave me, and I am doing my best to be more disciplined to take it, is to plan to write early in the morning. If you have a day job, get up extra early and write. You could still write throughout the day if you have time, but if you don't, you have those few hours or 30 minutes or whatever you can fit in done for the day. Do I always take it? No. I'm going to try and be more disciplined. Something that people told me constantly, and I didn't, and now that I'm marketing my book, I'm discovering, is there are so many new marketing tools that you have to learn, like Canva and BookBrush and some of these new things. And I have to say, I'm a little intimidated by some of them. I wish I had brushed up more and learned more before I act. I have to do it now. And there's pressure, and I wish I'd been more prepared for the marketing.
Right. It's a good point. It's really, really difficult because you think the work is done, once the book goes to print, and then it's like
Yes.
Act Two has just begun because now you have to sell the book not only in person but online, and there is so much out there, and it also feels like it changes every 5 minutes. So just as soon as you get comfortable
Right.
with something, like somebody flips the switch and it's an
Hmm.
entirely different thing. But maybe it's probably a good thing that I just read books and write about reading books and talk to people about reading the books that they've written. It seems like less of a headache. So my final question to you, of course, I have to ask if you can leave us with a teaser as to what comes next, because right down here at the bottom of the book, it says a wedding planning mystery, which leads me to believe that hopefully we can expect more of Katie Ludlow.
Absolutely. So far, and fingers crossed that it will be expanded, I have a 3-book deal with Level Best Books. So number 2 is 3/4 of the way written. There is sort of a party scene at the end of book 1, sort of the town party, I will tell you that. And number 2 picks up 5 minutes later at the town party.
Love it.
And so there is a very exciting, famous visitor that makes an appearance to that party. And something bad may happen to him. And she's pushed right back into the middle of things. And this time she is not the suspect, but someone close to her is.
Ah,
So she's back on the job.
I am enticed. I have to say, I love to hear that it picks up 5 minutes later, sometimes like those sequel movies do, because there is a bit of a cliffhanger here, as you mentioned. All of the mysteries, are resolved. And actually, one of the things I really appreciated about this book is the mysteries are resolved, and then you get, a couple chapters that just continue the more personal story arc, which I found kind of refreshing. And
Oh,
obviously,
good.
will lead into another book, but that was fun too. You think, oh, killer or killers have been found, justice has been done, end of book. But we actually get a little bonus content here leading into the next one. So if you haven't read it yet, you must. Again, it's Wedding Bride and Doom. It is available right now from Mary Karnes. Pick it up. You will not regret it. Mary, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Oh, John, it was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
That's it for this episode of Central Booking. Thanks for watching, and be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss a thing.